Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're diving into some pretty heavy stuff, the ideas of Friedrich Nietzsche.
Oh, yeah.
And I've got some excerpts here from Beyond Good and Evil that you sent over.
Great book.
It's intense, just skimming through it. I'm already seeing, huge questions about morality, good and evil, even how we can really know anything.
Yeah, Nietzsche, he was a real master at shaking things up. He just loved to challenge the foundations of, well, everything really. Morale, societal values.
Yeah, he doesn't hold back, does he?
Not at all. He looked at all those things that everyone else just took for granted, and he's like, wait a minute, what if we're totally wrong about all this?
It's like he's throwing a philosophical grenade.
Yeah.
Right? Conventional morality.
Sure did.
And one of the things that really stood out at me was this concept of slave morality.
Yes.
And he uses the example of early Christians.
Right. So Nietzsche's argument was that those early Christians, they were feeling pretty powerless under Roman rule.
Yeah, I can see that.
So they kind of flipped the script, right? They started praising virtues like humility, obedience, things that made their situation bearable.
Makes sense.
But then the Roman values, strength, assertiveness, those suddenly became the evil ones.
So it's like not that those qualities are bad in themselves.
Yeah.
But it's the motivation behind valuing them that Nietzsche is really picking apart.
Exactly. He's looking at the power dynamics at play. How the values we uphold can be tied to our social standing.
It's a really subversive way to gain some moral high ground when you're not actually in a position of power.
Absolutely. And Nietzsche saw this pattern repeating throughout history.
Yeah.
Wherever you have groups who lack power, they tend to reframe morality to fit their situation.
So that's the slave morality that he's critiquing.
Right. He saw it as potentially holding people back from growth and self-realization.
Okay, so then what's the alternative? What does Nietzsche offer in its place?
Well, he contrasts slave morality with what he calls master morality.
Okay, and that's like the flip side.
Exactly. Think of the ancient Greeks or the Vikings, those warrior cultures.
Oh, yeah.
They valued power, courage, achievement. They set their own standards of good and bad, didn't care what others thought.
It's almost like a creator morality,
Yeah.
right? They're not waiting for someone to give them permission to define what's good.
That's a great way to put it. It's about self-determination, forging your own path.
I like that. So it creates a stark contrast to slave morality, which is much more reactive, you said.
Yeah, it comes from a place of reaction resentment even. It's about reacting to the power structure rather than defining your own terms.
Okay, so Nietzsche's already shaking things up with his ideas about morality.
He's just getting started.
But then he turns his attention to religion, and things get even more intense.
Right. He saw religion, particularly Christianity, as another manifestation of that slave morality he was talking about.
Oh, wow. How so?
Well, he thought it was a way to control the masses through guilt promises of an afterlife, things like that.
Interesting. So that leads us to that very famous phrase, God is dead.
Yeah, that one gets thrown around a lot, and it's often misunderstood.
I can imagine.
Nietzsche wasn't literally saying God never existed. What he meant was that belief in the traditional God, the one people relied on for meaning and morality that had lost its power.
Like society had outgrown the old ideas.
Right, and that leaves this huge void, right? It's both terrifying and exciting.
So what fills that void then, if not the traditional God?
Well, that's where the will to power comes in.
Okay, now this is the part I'm really curious about, because it sounds kind of menacing, but I have a feeling it's a lot more nuanced than just wanting to rule the world.
Absolutely. The will to power is this core drive that Nietzsche saw as fundamental to human nature. It's what pushes us to overcome limitations, to become the best versions of ourselves.
So it's more about pushing your own boundaries, not necessarily about dominating others.
That's a great way to put it. It's about self-realization and reaching your full potential.
I like that. It's less about power over others and more about power from within.
Exactly. It's the driving force behind creativity, innovation, growth.
Okay, so we're starting to see some of the big pieces of Nietzsche's philosophy here.
It's just the tip of the iceberg.
But he doesn't stop there. He goes on to challenge our whole idea of truth.
Oh, yeah. Nietzsche wasn't afraid to question anything.
He even suggests that sometimes things like illusion or uncertainty might be preferable to truth.
Right. He recognized that sometimes truth can be dangerous or destabilizing.
So it's not about just promoting lying or anything like that. It's more about acknowledging that maybe we need some healthy illusions to thrive.
Exactly. It's a really provocative idea that forces us to rethink our assumptions about what's good and bad.
So Nietzsche has us questioning morality, religion, and even truth itself.
He's on a roll.
But then he takes it even further by exploring the nature of knowledge itself.
Right. Nietzsche was really skeptical about how much we can truly know.
How so?
Well, he emphasized how our senses can deceive us, how our interpretations are always colored by our own perspectives.
So if we can't fully trust our senses, then how do we ever know if we're really understanding anything?
That's the million-dollar question, right? Nietzsche pushes us to confront the limits of our knowledge and to embrace the uncertainty that comes with being human.
Well, he's certainly given us a lot to think about already.
And we're just getting started.
But before we dive too deep into existential angst, let's move on to another aspect of Nietzsche's philosophy that really struck me, his perspective on suffering.
Ah, yes, that's a big one.
You'd think a philosopher would see suffering as something to avoid at all costs.
Right. It seems counterintuitive.
But Nietzsche saw it as absolutely crucial for growth and development.
He did. He even said that a life without suffering would make people weak and contemptible.
Wow, that's a strong statement. So it's not about seeking out pain, but recognizing that hardship can lead to deeper understanding and self-discovery.
Precisely. He challenges the idea that a pain-free life is the ultimate goal.
It's more about embracing the full spectrum of human experience, the good and the bad.
Exactly. It's through facing challenges and overcoming them that we build strength and resilience.
This is a lot to process, but it's also incredibly thought-provoking.
It is. Nietzsche really makes you think critically about your assumptions.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground, but there's one big piece we haven't fully explored yet, the will to power. We talked about it as this driving force.
Right, a fundamental drive.
But I have a feeling there's a lot more to unpack there.
Oh, definitely. The will to power is central to Nietzsche's whole philosophy.
Perfect. That's exactly what we're going to do next. So stick around because this philosophical roller coaster is just getting started.
You know, when you really dig into Nietzsche, it's amazing how much he connects morality to psychology.
Oh, yeah.
He's not just like laying down the law about what's right and wrong. He wants to know why people believe the things they do about good and evil, you know?
And that's where he gets into this idea that morality isn't some like objective truth handed down from on high. It's something that we create. It's shaped by history power struggles, even our own psychology.
Right on. And that's where those two types of morality come in, remember? Master morality and slave morality.
Okay, yeah, we touched on those terms before, but maybe we need to break them down a little more. What's the core difference between these two systems?
It all boils down to where they come from and what they value. So think back to that master morality. It comes from a place of strength, confidence.
Okay.
Those with master morality, they value power, courage, creativity. They decide what's good based on their own internal compass, not some rule book or what society tells them.
So it's like they're writing their own code of conduct.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now flip that and you've got slave morality, which Nietzsche saw as coming from resentment, powerlessness.
Okay, I'm with you.
The slaves, the ones who are oppressed or feel weak, they create a morality that flips the master's values on their head.
So they take the things they're forced to deal with, humility, obedience, self-sacrifice, and they turn those into the good traits.
Exactly. And the qualities of the powerful, assertiveness, strength, those become the new evils.
That's fascinating. So it's like a way for the powerless to claim some moral authority, even if they don't have actual power.
Right. It's a way of saying, hey, even though we're not in control, at least we're morally superior.
And that's where Nietzsche starts to critique slave morality. Right.
Yeah, he was worried that it could stifle human potential, keep people from striving for excellence.
I can see how this could be controversial. I mean, some people might read Nietzsche and think he's advocating for elitism or oppression.
I can see that, but I think Nietzsche was more concerned with individual potential, with people not being afraid to embrace their strengths and strive for greatness.
So it's not about judging people for the moral system they subscribe to. It's more about recognizing that these systems exist and they influence us in powerful ways.
Exactly. It's about becoming aware of the forces that shape our values and then making conscious choices about what we truly believe.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
It's like holding up a mirror to ourselves and to society and saying, hey, let's examine where these values come from.
Right. And that awareness can be really empowering.
So we've dug pretty deep into Nietzsche's take on morality and how it connects to power psychology and even history.
We've covered a lot of ground.
It's complex stuff, but it really makes you think. And it sets the stage for understanding some of his other big ideas, like the will to power.
Right. We've talked about it a little bit, but the will to power is much more than just a concept.
Okay.
It's the engine that drives so much of human behavior, according to Nietzsche.
Yeah, it's that energy that pushes us to create, to overcome, to reach for something beyond ourselves. I'm ready to dive deeper.
Let's do it, because understanding the will to power is key to understanding Nietzsche's whole philosophy.
Okay, so we've been through a lot with Nietzsche, haven't we? Morality, religion, truth, suffering.
He really covers it all, doesn't he?
But now it's time to tackle this will to power head on.
Yeah, let's do it.
It's like the grand finale of our philosophical fireworks show.
I like that analogy. So remember how Nietzsche questioned whether truth was always the most important thing?
Yeah, he really threw that curveball at us.
Well, the will to power helps explain why. You see, it's the fundamental drive that's built into every living thing.
Okay.
It's what pushes us to grow, to strive, to overcome, to create.
But hold on, doesn't that sound kind of ruthless? Like, is it just about dominating others, becoming some power-hungry dictator?
That's a really common misunderstanding, I think. When Nietzsche talks about the will to power, he's not talking about lording it over other people.
Okay, good, because that was not a good look.
No, not at all. It's more about self-mastery, about fulfilling your potential, shaping the world around you to fit your vision.
So it's more like the drive that pushes artists to create masterpieces or entrepreneurs to build businesses.
Exactly. It's that internal fire to make a mark on the world, not just to boss people around.
Okay, that makes more sense. But if everyone is driven by this will to power, wouldn't that just lead to chaos, constant competition, and conflict?
Well, Nietzsche wasn't advocating for a dog-eat-dog world.
Okay, that's a relief.
He believed this will to power could be expressed in lots of different ways, not all of them aggressive.
Like what?
Well, it can fuel creative pursuits, personal growth, strong relationships, even acts of generosity and compassion.
So it's like this energy is within us all, and it's up to us to decide how we use it.
Exactly. The key is becoming aware of it and making choices that are in line with our values.
So it's not just about being powerful, it's about using that power for something meaningful.
Right. It's about living a life of purpose and creating something worthwhile.
That actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And it brings us back to something we talked about earlier, Nietzsche's challenge to our ideas about knowledge.
Ah, yes.
How does that fit into the whole will to power picture?
Well, remember, Nietzsche recognized that our understanding of the world is always going to be filtered through our own individual lenses, our experiences, our values, our perspectives.
Right. We don't have some objective God's eye view of reality.
Exactly. So even our pursuit of knowledge is influenced by this will to power.
How so?
Think about it. The questions we ask, the information we seek out, the interpretations we make, they're all shaped by our desires, our values, even our unconscious drives.
So even when we think we're being objective, there's always this element of ourselves, this will to power shaping how we see things.
It's true. It's humbling in a way.
It is. But Nietzsche didn't see this as a bad thing.
No, he didn't. He saw this inherent subjectivity as part of what makes us human. It's what allows for diverse perspectives, new possibilities, unique creations.
So it's not about giving up on the pursuit of knowledge, but accepting that it will always be limited.
Exactly. And I think that's a really important point. It's about being curious, questioning our assumptions, staying open to new ways of seeing the world.
This whole deep dive has been quite the journey.
It has, hasn't it?
Nietzsche really makes you think. And even though some of his ideas are challenging,
Definitely.
there's also something very liberating about them.
Absolutely. He challenges us to question everything, to break free from conventional thinking, to really embrace life in all its complexity.
So if Nietzsche were sitting here with us right now, what kind of challenge do you think he'd leave our listeners with?
That's a good question. I think he'd ask us to consider this. If traditional morality is really a form of social control, and truth isn't always the ultimate goal, then what new values should we strive for in the 21st century?
Ooh, that's a big one.
It is. And how do we balance this will to power with the need for cooperation and empathy in an increasingly interconnected world?
That's the challenge he'd leave us with.
I think so. It's a challenge for each of us individually and as a society.
Well, on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dives into the mind of Friedrich Nietzsche.
It's been a pleasure exploring his ideas with you.
Likewise. Thanks for joining us on this philosophical adventure, everyone. Until next time.